And we want to lift their heart right from the start. So today I am going to set out 3 ways that you can start your speech, 3 different drugs that you can deal. The first drug that we can deal is dopamine. This is the one that we want to go for if we want our audience to feel like that. Dopamine is the pleasure drug. It makes us feel strong, satisfied, wonderful. So how do we get that going in a speech? Simple. We start with a joke. There are heaps of websites and books full of one-liners and anecdotes just waiting to be reused and recycled. Most speakers have 1 or 2 of these up their sleeve that they're just ready to shuffle out any time that they want to. And it doesn't matter whether it's an old shaggy dog story or a Churchill anecdote or a Seinfeld one-liner, as long as it makes people laugh. That's all that matters. So my own go-to gag, if I can try it on you, is one of... So anyone can learn a gag like that. The power of self-deprecatory humour is immense. It reduces even the most pompous speaker and elevates the audience, making them feel superior, which is why, of course, they love it. It's also a sign of supreme confidence on the part of the speaker. Or I saw a businessman start a speech the other day where he opened up, remembering this conversation that he'd had with his wife at the breakfast table this morning, where he turned to her and said, "Did you ever, in your wildest dreams, imagine that one day I would be running one of the largest companies on the planet?" To which she replied, "Darling, you never featured in any of my wildest dreams." Sometimes we want our audience looking a little bit like this. If that's the case, the drug we deal is oxytocin. Oxytocin is the empathy drug, the love drug. It makes us feel all warm, fuzzy, and gooey. It's the same hormone that's released naturally when mothers are breastfeeding, when we're holding hands, or when we're listening to a great speech, because great speeches always include stories. You think about any of the great speeches that you've seen over the last year, and I'm thinking Oprah Winfrey, Pink, Michelle Obama, Emma Watson, people like this. They're all telling stories. And you see, this is the thing. There's a myth about speech making, that you tell them what you're going to tell them, then you tell them it, and then you tell them what you've just told them. And that is like, tell your audience you're going to be boring, then be boring, and then tell your audience you've just been boring. So what you find the best speakers will do is they'll make their points, but they'll be wrapped up in a story. And I mean a good story, like a movie or a novel, where you have a strong hero, scary antagonists, and a big, big goal. The story might be metaphorical, like Churchill's Iron Curtain or Hillary Clinton smashing through the glass ceiling. The story might be historical, from someone we admire, like Cleopatra to Confucius, Malala to Mandela, Jane Austen to John Lennon. But for me, the best stories are the personal ones. So I'm going to tell you God-honest truth. As I was coming here today, I had a call with my wife where my wife was in tears because this afternoon her sister had a baby boy, being born very, very quickly, and as a result, when she was born, she was struggling to breathe. And so she went into the special care unit for the first 9 days of her life. And she's absolutely fine now, before anyone worries, back at school today. But the thing was that this was the worst time of my life, because we didn't know whether she was going to make it through or not. Me and my wife were literally going to the hospital every waking hour and checking on her. I was drawing pictures of her because we thought that that was all that we might have. You know, my mother-in-law came down to stay to look after our eldest daughter, so as if things weren't hard enough. But the thing that I really remember about this is that all of the time when I was going in there to see Alice, in the incubator next to her, there were 2 twins. And they were the tiniest babies that I have ever seen before in my whole life. So was that more persuasive? Forgive me sharing the story, but you kind of do have to do it to demonstrate what's happened. And the thing is that if we went round now and we checked all of your blood levels, what we would find for most of you would be higher levels of oxytocin. Because we've connected, you've shared my story, you've seen the world through my eyes. Not for all of you. On the balance of probability, at least 6 of the people in this room are actually psychopathic and incapable of empathy. And by the way, I think I've got you. I know which ones you are. But for the rest of you, you would have higher levels of oxytocin. And this is critical. The neuroscientist Paul Zak has shown there's a direct correlation between our oxytocin levels and our susceptibility to persuasion. But we don't always want our audience looking like that. Sometimes we want our audience looking a little bit like this. So how do we do that? How do we do that? How do we make them look like that? What's the answer? How do we do it? Come on. How do we do it? For goodness sake. Well, just like that. We ask a question. All of your faces now. That's absolutely right, like that. This is the university lecture. How to wake up your audience. And the thing is that when you ask an audience a question like that, they have increased levels of cortisol. Cortisol is the stress drug, the fear drug. It raises our heartbeat, focuses our attention, increases our energy levels. It gets us ready for fight or flight. Very, very instinctive. And you get it by asking questions. And so this is why asking questions is something you'll see real high-pressure speakers do, like evangelists or salesmen or stand-up comedians. If they want to shut up the audience, they'll just flip it back on them. And you see very powerful speakers doing it as well. So it might be an emotional question. You could ask an emotional question. How many of you have lost someone that you really loved? It could be a factual question. Did you know that the richest 46 people on the planet have the same wealth as the poorest 50% of people on the planet? You could fit the richest people on a double-decker bus. It could be a kind of philosophical question. Why are we all here today? Why are we meeting today? Not yesterday, not tomorrow, but here and now. What is it that's brought us together? What magical force is it that's brought us together? Are we just here to swap business cards? Or are we here because we've got something deeper in common? The best speakers, though, will ask kind of prolonged questions which present like a moral dilemma. And there's one guy I saw do this absolutely amazingly not so long ago. And so he opened up like this. He said, right, it's 1935, India, and you're Mahatma Gandhi. You are running to catch a train just as the train is leaving the station. And as you board the train, one of your sandals comes off and falls under the train onto the track. What do you do? Do you board the train, carry on getting on the train? Or do you go back to the platform so you can retrieve your sandal? I'd like you just to think about that. We'll come back to that at the end. All of us, what? Completely threw us. And then he went into the body of his speech where he started talking about leadership, his theories on leadership, and it was all stories and questions and jokes. And all the time, I couldn't get this image of Gandhi out of my mind. It was just absolutely, it was wedged in my mind. And then it got to the end of his speech, and almost as an afterthought, he said, "Oh yes, Gandhi, the station." He asked for a show of hands. So how many people would have got on the train? He asked for a show of hands. People put their hands up. How many of you would have gone back to retrieve your sandal? Fantastic. Well, let me tell you what Gandhi actually did. What he did was he took off his remaining sandal and he threw it onto the track under the train. And when his companion said, "Why did you do that?" Gandhi replied, "Well, so whoever finds them has a complete pair of sandals for them to wear." Genius, a question and a story. And it makes so many points, doesn't it? Like about values, about compassion, thinking rationally under pressure, about showing there's always an alternative to fight or flight. But critically, it creates feelings. And that's what all of this is about. Questions, stories, jokes, they create feelings. As Maya Angelou wrote, people will forget what you said, they'll forget what you did, but they will never, ever forget how you made them feel.